I am Musashden. I'm Musashden here, there, and everywhere. And I will see you guys at the Atlanta SciFi Expo on March 15th and 16th. Okay, my name is Musashden. That's my stage name is Musashden. I'm Musashden everywhere on the internet, spelled that way, Musashden. And I'm from New York, actually, but I've lived in Atlanta for basically my whole life, since I was like 2. So basically from Atlanta, kind of from New York, kind of, sort of. And my passion in life is just creating stuff. So I do art, I do comics. I recently wrote a novel, like a full-on, just a regular romance novel that I'm trying to get the handle on publishing this week. Like, it's a lot involved. So my original comics were, the one that started it all is this one right here, Illegal Tender. That's probably what I'm most known for. Is like, oh yeah, you're the Illegal Tender chick. Like, yeah, Illegal Tender is like my longest one. I've been pumping Illegal Tender for nearly 10 years now. That is my oldest one. And my most recent one, well, the newest one, it's a little older at this point. It's not as new as the book, was Red. This one's about vampires. And Red is fairly new. I'll be selling it at the table. And then my latest thing is my book, Jules. This is just the one that's just a straight novel. And this one I just published this week. So yes, I like writing stories. Basically, I love writing stories most of all, but then I add the artwork to it and it becomes a comic or a book cover. So yeah. The ebook is available on Amazon. The printed version you can buy directly from me, directly from Musashden.com, because Amazon, when it comes to printing stuff, they're kind of like they don't give you as much as the ebooks, because the ebooks they don't have to print and they don't have to ship it, so you get more royalties on the ebook. But the printed version, I'm just like, oh, it's actually more cost effective for me to buy them and have a stock for myself, and then when people order them, I can just ship them out. I actually make more doing that. So the ebook is available on Amazon. If you search Jules and then my name, Musashden, hopefully it pops up. They're telling me it's not going to be fully on the website for another 5 days or something, and I'm just like, great. But if you go to Musashden.com, it'll take you directly to my store, and my book is Jules is the first thing. Jules, Illegal Tender, and Red are like the first things on that website. The influence at the time were definitely the cartoons I was watching, like because there was no back when I was a kid, there was no Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon barely had like 3 shows on it. So I would watch any cartoon. Like, I used to watch Sailor Moon on UPN. Like, that's the earliest time that I can remember watching an anime. Didn't realize it was an anime. But I used to love Sailor Moon back when I was like, I had to have been like maybe like 8 years old. And I was like, oh, this cartoon is different from Bugs Bunny. Like, oh, she's cool. So I used to love Sailor Moon, and like all the ones with like a continuing plot. Like Gargoyles was one of my favorites, and SWAT Cats, and SWAT Cats was a Cartoon Network thing that came later. But like, I used to just love watching anything animated. Well, because, you don't start out writing, so I guess drawing came first. I was like, oh, I want to draw the cartoon characters that I see. They didn't really come out looking how they did on the screen. But, after about 20 years at this, I'm pretty good at it. They started looking like how they should now. So I'm just like, oh, good. No writing. Most of the writing is like formal writing, like writing essays and stuff like that. And I was just like, that's not really creative writing. I don't think I ever took a creative writing class. I'm just naturally good at telling stories. As far as art went, I went to a whole art school, have a whole bachelor's degree in fine arts. And yeah, I guess that formal training did a little something, but for the most part, I learned most of what I know about digital art from other digital artists on YouTube. Like when I went to college, YouTube wasn't really the place to go to find art tutorials. It was the place to go to find some stupid video about a boy tipping over a cow or whatever YouTube used to be. It used to be so weird back in the day. Now it's like you can find whatever video you're looking for on YouTube, and I'm like, that's wild to see the growth of that site like that. But yes, I actually went to oh god, what is the name of my college? American Intercontinental University. So AIU, back when they had a campus in Buckhead, which is interesting because it's not there anymore. I drove by there the other day. It's like I think the building is like a bank now or something. A bank and a parking lot is what my college turned into. So I was like, okay, well, whatever. Yeah, it was between that and like, what did I used to say when I was younger? I was like, I would either want to be a veterinarian or a cartoonist. And I was like, one day I learned, like, if you're a veterinarian, you got to put the animals to sleep when they're old. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. Artist it is. I was like, oh no, I can't hurt like, hurting them is not hurting them to put them to sleep. They're old and stuff like that. So I was like, I can't. Yes to the artist. Like, it became naturally to me. So I was like, all right, let's do this. That evolved with time, actually. I didn't come up with my own comic series until, I was in high school. I was like in 10th grade, and I was showing my art teacher one of my fan characters, because that's what I used to do. I used to create fan characters for pre-existing stuff. Like, I'm the world's oldest fangirl, right? So I was showing him my fan character, my 1500 fan character for like Dragon Ball Z or whatever it was at the time. And he kind of looks at it and he's like, why don't you create your own thing? And I was like, huh? And he's like, you have all these characters meant to fit into other people's stuff. He's like, I don't think he meant it, but like, why are you always copying other people's stuff? Like, he was like, hey, you got all these ideas. Why don't you just, hey, you can create your own series, right? Like, nobody's going to stop you. And it was like an aha moment. Like, oh my God, you're right. I could create my own thing. Like, it just hadn't dawned on me until, my art teacher said it to me. But back then I created, what was it? Like the very first version of Red. It was basically magical girls and vampires together. And it was called Element Warriors? I think something like that. Because I was like, 16? Still watching Sailor Moon and all these other anime that were just now trickling into America. And I was just like, oh, magical girls meets vampires. That's what I was interested in at the time. And it was the very, very, very first version of Red. And so I created that, shelved it for a couple of years because I started making another comic book, which would eventually be Illegal Tender. It was called Kiddo at the time. And shelved that for a number of years, came back to Red, shelved Red again, made Illegal Tender for the past 10 years, shelved Illegal Tender because it came to a natural stopping point. I was like, if I ended the comic right here, nobody would be asking for more issues. And I was like, let me go back to Red, because like I actually got people online, like on DeviantArt, asking, are you ever gonna do the one about vampires again? And I was like, oh, I've got fans. So I went back to Red and I did one issue of Red, and I was like, you know what? I'm like chasing like the tail end of popular genres here. I was like, if I did the one issue of Red, and I was like, if nobody shows an interest in this, and if nobody ever reads it, reviews it, picks it up, it doesn't pick up, I might not be doing the rest of it. And so while Red was taking a break, I wrote the novel. And the novel was from me, like, lo and behold, it took me 2 years to write this novel and to get it right and to edit it and do all that. So lo and behold, I started writing the novel because I hyper fixated on Meg Thee Stallion and Mads Mikkelsen at the same time. And I was like, let me write a book. Let me write a book. Because honestly, when I'm at the table, when I'm at conventions and people come up and they're like, oh, I like your artwork. And I was like, oh, well, do you read comics? And their answer a lot of the time is no. They're like, no, I don't read comics. And I'm like, you're currently at a comic convention, right? Right? And they're just like, Yeah, I know, but like a lot of the time they come there specifically for like artwork or stuff from pre-existing stuff that they already watched, like an anime or something like that. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. So not a lot of people read comic books, and I was like, you know who reads a lot? Like more people read novels, like books, than they do comic books. So I was like, oh well, let's corner this market, like a comic book and a book now. Yeah, I wouldn't call it easier. They both take a lot of time. Like with the book, a lot more research had to be done with the book because I know Illegal Sand is about people with superpowers, which is superhero genre. I know all up and down. Red is about vampires, vampire genre. I know all up and down. The book is actually about. Well, I became obsessed with 3 things to write the book. It was Meg Thee Stallion, Mads Mikkelsen, and Cyberpunk, the video game. So like the book is kind of a combination of those 3 weird things that were just on my mind. So I had to do like a lot of research for the book, like a ton of research on like Denmark and osteointegration and tattooing and just random, like the book is like a lot of things that come together to make it interesting. The comic book, I just had to draw it and come up with a kind of a plot about, you know, vampires or superpower people. I don't know. They each have their challenges, but I wouldn't exactly call either one more difficult than the other because the book took a lot of editing, like a lot of editing. The comic book is just kind of like, oh, it's you draw the picture, it's good enough. Send it off to print. Put the word bubbles up there so people know what's going on, and then that's that. The book had a lot of plot points. Like I feel like novels have more plot points than comic books. And the comic book is like, here's the villain of the week. Here's the problem of the week. Bing, bang, boom. You try to defeat them or you don't, and it continues on. With the novel, it's just kind of like, oh, you have to develop this character and this character and this character and her friends and her family and where she lives and what she does. Like with the comic book, you could show that. You can just show it in the comic book by drawing it out. But with the book, you have to describe what they're wearing rather than draw it. So it's just kind of like, So yeah, they're a little bit different, but it's completely by accident. I don't know what I'm doing. It's like a lot of people ask me, they're just like, well, how did you come up with this? And I'm like, I have no idea. No clue. Well, no, like, okay, with Red, with the vampire thing, Buffy the Vampire Slayer was one of my favorite shows because I was the target demographic when it came out. I was like, what, maybe 13 years old? I was the target demographic for that, you know, teen drama with vampires kind of thing. And I was like, oh, great. And then it didn't hurt that they had David Boreanaz in the show. And I'm all the way in love with that man. So it's just kind of like, okay. So vampires, I was like, okay, this lore is kind of cool. So getting outside of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you find out that people have all sorts of different rules for vampires and the like. Like the lore just goes on and on and on. Like you have stuff like Buffy, but then you also have stuff like what was it? The one where it was just awful and vampirism transferred to like these worm things. It was like The Strain. They made it into a TV show. It's like they have stuff like Buffy, which is like, oh, Buffy and Anne Rice, where it's like, oh, vampires are beautiful and this, that, and living forever, but having the drama of it all. Then you have stuff like The Strain, where it's just horror, straight up horror. Like the vampires are not pretty; they're like part of a hive mind. They get ugly and they're truly like demonic. Like when they turn, there is no humanity left in them. It's almost like The Strain was almost like vampirism and zombies put together. Like more than just like, you know, oh, vampirism, no. But then there's like stuff like I said, like Anne Rice was a vampire thing, and then like can't remember what other vampire stuff that I read, but there's like a lot of different there's a lot of stuff that you could do with vampires, just like there's a lot of stuff you can do with like the superhero genre. Because it doesn't always have to be a man in a cape. It could be just like a dude in a t-shirt that's just trying to live. Oh, always. Like people are like, oh no, this character isn't me, isn't it? A self-insert liar. every writer basically writes, like, if it's a good story, people will be like, oh, the story's so good, like, it's so relatable. It's because you based it off of stuff in your real life. So with Illegal Tender, the main theme of Illegal Tender is basically oppression. And I hate to bring race into it, but yeah, as a Black woman in America, oppression is around every corner. So I was like, oh, so I took a lot of notes from how they did X-Men, because X-Men is also about the oppression of a minority group, even though, you know, a majority of the mutants are, I don't want to say a majority of them, but most of them are white and fairly good looking, but they're still getting oppressed because they're mutants and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, so let's take it a step further with Illegal Tender. Let's make, you know, having powers illegal, like make it really oppressive. So yeah, take that from real life, and like the girl in Illegal Tender is a light-skinned Black girl. So she has to deal with a lot of stuff. In Red, I don't know if I took like a lot of life notes from Red to make it. It's basically like just like this story of like this vampire searching for his wife that's been missing. So it's just kind of like, oh, it's a story to be like, in their world, there's like an entire society, like you go to school to hunt demons. Like there's like schools and organizations to hunt down these demons, but through the vampire husband, you learn that, you know, these demons are trying to mind their business. Like it's kind of like that. So yeah, that comes from real life as well. It's just like, oh, there's like whole societies that hate what you are, but you're just out here trying to live your life. Like, yeah, so that comes from real life as well. And Jules, the new book, that's about real life as well. It's about a Black woman trying to keep the block that her business is on safe from, you know, developers and people who are vandalizing it, and just she's trying to make a better life for her and her friends and her family, but she keeps getting arrested.
Oh wow.
But it's simply, she keeps getting arrested, and it's just like people accuse her of being a gang member, and she's just like, nah, none of that's true. I'm just trying to live over here. And she just so happens to meet some dude along the way that might be able to help her. If I had a piece of advice to give to a young writer, well, it depends on what they want to do. Mm-hmm. Like my piece of advice is research. You can never do too much research. Mm-hmm. There are so many books and shows and movies out there where it doesn't look like anybody researched anything about the subject matter that they're doing, and it comes off as phony and half done. Like so much stuff concerning especially Black people. It's like, did you talk to a single Black person before you made this? Because it feels like you didn't. Did you talk to a single woman before you wrote this role of this woman? Because it feels like you didn't. It feels like, so I'm just like, you never do too much research. There's no such thing as too much research. And I feel like I didn't do enough. Like the book that I wrote, Jules, the main character, one of the main love interests, his name is Vil, and he's from Denmark. And I'm just like, ooh, I gotta research Denmark. I don't know anything about Denmark. So I've learned so much stuff about Denmark and the Netherlands and Norway and Sweden and how they're all different. Like Northern Europe, I'm all about, because honestly, they didn't teach it in American public school. They're just like, what? You don't need to know about that. You need to know a useless form of math that you're never going to use again in your life. You don't need to know about those other countries. Don't worry about them over there. But yeah, so I had to do a ton of research on Denmark, and her profession is nothing like mine. Like she's like in the book, she's a tattoo artist. And I was like, oh, that seems like something I could do because I can draw. So I was already looking into becoming a tattoo artist, but then I was like, oh, like, I don't know what turned me off to it, but I was like, oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, you can never do enough research. You never do too much research. Like right. Even with Illegal Tender, I had to look up what are the positions in a bar? Like they operate out of a bar. So I was like, are there just waitresses and servers? Like, no, you got bar backs, you got The bartender, you got the manager, you got the assistant manager, this, that, third, blah, 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 bliggity blue. And then, like, for red, I was just like, that one's completely made up. I just made up my own rules for vampires. And I was like, well, but even still, I was like, what are the baseline rules for most vampires? Subsistent on blood, sleep in a coffin, can't go out during the day, you know, baseline rules. And then you're able to take that and be like, okay, so for my vampires, they're going to do this, and it's based off of this rule here. So my advice, research, and learn. Watch videos on it, look it up, practice. You can never do enough research. That's my answer.